Awesome. Yeah, we'll get started in just about 1 minute. I know this is an ugly slide that is on the screen, but I think it looks so much better when I'm actually showing you the screenshots of people's real words and emails. So these are just a compilation over the last few weeks of just awesome feedback that we've gotten, not only about this new tool that we're about to dive into as a group, but just about Labflow and our company in general. So if you're a current user, you might recognize some names up there. If you're not a current user, this is just a fun slide to start off with to show you that we really are something special. We're founded by the same founders that founded Sapling Learning. So if you've been around for a while and you remember Sapling Learning, same group of people, and we do great work. And so you can see here on the screen, I mean, like, I'm serious. This is just a small sample of the love that we get continuously. So as we start, it's right at starting time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So a couple housekeeping things. This is being recorded. So if you need to hop off for any reason or you want to share this with a colleague or a friend, we will be sure to send you the recording when we're finished. Like Liz said, you are on mute on purpose, but you can utilize the chat. So it should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see it, you might have to hover over and a toolbar will appear. So please use that chat function to ask questions, just give us any kind of feedback as we're going. I want this to be as interactive as possible while you're all on mute, which I know is kind of hard to do. So make sure you give us any kind of thoughts or feedback in the chat or chat with each other. Lastly, we will have a survey at the end of this. It's a quick 4-question survey. It will take you less than 30 seconds. At Labflow, everything we do is based on your feedback and what we can do to make your job easier. So this feedback, we actually do something with it. Dane will look at it, our product people will look at it, and it really helps form future enhancements and things that we do within the product. So if you have the time at the end, if you could answer that quick survey for us, it means the world to us. We really appreciate it. So I'll go ahead and jump in. So we've got a good mix here today of current customers and non-customers. So I wanted to sort of just give a really broad overview of what we even do here at Catalyst and what is the Labflow story. Why do we even do what we do? So this is a lot of words on the slide, but if you just want to kind of glance at the colored words, our company is founded by former chemistry and biology educators just like you. And they were experiencing a problem that we're assuming a lot of you also experience, which is chemistry is hard, biology is hard, science classes are hard, but the labs are really fun. And that's what makes students want to keep going in their science education. Labs are the exciting part. So how can we make sure that they're successful and set up for success in labs so that they don't get so frustrated that they go be sociology majors, because no one wants that. So our mission is to sort of help students through technology feel prepared to walk into that lab, have a lot of low stakes practice and things they can do, guide them through their lab experiment if they're using the product in the lab, and then also help them post-lab with robust feedback, multiple attempts on lab reports, which is something without technology you would have never been able to do, because how could you grade all of that in that way? So it's a great product for students. It's a great product for TAs or whoever's doing the grading and the running of your courses. That is very, very time consuming. And with so much auto grading and so many analytics, which we're going to dive into today, which is really exciting, we can save you tons and tons of time. So that's a big thing. And then, like I said, we are founded by people who have been in your position. So we're constantly updating our software. We are not a big publisher that every 3 years you're going to get a new book. We are making updates every week almost, fixing things, enhancing things, making things easier. So it's really important for us to do things like this to learn from you. So I'm actually not going to dive into a demo today of Labflow because, like I said, I think we've got some people on the call who are already users, so I don't want to bore you. But I will do a quick just overview of what the platform looks like. So we house everything you need. This is your one-stop shop for success in a lab. I have worked for actually several other ed tech companies, and I'm not just saying this because I'm here. Labflow is the coolest product that I've ever sold because everything else I sold, I felt like was a little bit of just a glorified LMS, right? Like, okay, you've got quizzes, cool. You've got this. I can do that in Canvas. That is not what Labflow is. And data insights is a huge part of that, which we're going to get into. But if you want to check out Labflow, if you're not a current user, at the end of the webinar, we'll have a chance for you to request a demo. But really basic overview, we've got these card view or a list view. It's a one-stop shop for you and your students. We've got tons and tons and tons of amazing videos so that students can read a little, watch a little, and then they are quizzed on the content in those videos. Safety stuff like pre-lab. But then the real magic sauce, and anyone who's a current user can probably speak to this, is our post-lab activities. You can call these worksheets, you might call these lab reports, however you do your post-lab assessment. It is an amazing tool to offer instant feedback to students, multiple attempts, just a really, really powerful post-lab experience. So if anyone's a current customer and is on the call and you want to add anything in the chat around maybe your favorite feature of Labflow or how it's helped you, that would be great. But what we're going to dive into today is truly the coolest thing. It is our data insights tool. So again, I've sold a lot of products. You all probably have used a competitive product or maybe your LMS. And the grade book and the analytics that you get from activity that your students and graders doing is pretty bare. It's the bare minimum. There's not a lot you can do with it. You probably are exporting a lot of stuff, putting it into your own spreadsheet, doing all these calculations and trying to figure out where the outliers are. And we don't want you to do that. So we have built an amazing tool. Dr. Dane DeSutter is here. He is the creator of this tool, and he is here to show you it. If you're a current user, we actually have some brand new parts of Data Insights that were just released last week. And if you're not a user at all, then this will be a great education for you into the types of robust data analytics we can provide. So I'll pass it over unless anyone has any overviewing questions. Like I said, at the end, we'll have a quick survey, and there will be an opportunity for you on that survey to say, I would like, a deeper, more in-depth demo. So I know I didn't get into much about the platform, but I wanted to make sure we focused on the topic at hand. So unless anyone has any questions, I'll pass it over to Dane, and I'll kind of watch out for the chat. So Dane, if you want to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate the wonderful introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to make sure that we can all see. We're going to be interacting with the product. So even though we didn't necessarily do a full demo, we will be getting a demo of different components of the data insights component of Labflow. Can somebody let me know if my screen is visible?
Yes, it is.
Great. Thank you. So as Kim said, I am Dr. Dane DeSutter, and I am a data scientist here at Catalyst Education. And what I want to talk about today is data, right? We're all here because data is really cool. And the things that we can do with data, especially as we try to understand and improve our courses, can be really valuable in terms of really impacting students' lives. So I want to talk about how Data Insights is designed to help you do that and give you a taste for some of the different things that we've been building into the Labflow platform. So just a little bit about me. I did my PhD in the learning sciences, and the learning sciences is it's a cross-disciplinary field that focuses a lot on science education, both in formal and informal contexts. So both in terms of classroom learning, but there's a number of my colleagues who also worked in museum settings. I primarily worked in a chemistry education context, and the lab that I was doing a lot of my research in focused in chemistry education and also a little bit in some bio and biochemistry education as well. Throughout my tenure working in the lab, both as a grad student and as a postdoc, I worked on a number of projects that were really trying to create big curricular innovations that can change how we teach really complicated concepts, both in general chemistry and organic chemistry. And we would typically start where we would come up with an intervention. We would introduce this in a laboratory setting where we could really tightly control a lot of the variables that we were trying to measure. And once we started to see some really positive signals that this was working, students were learning as a result of these interventions, we would then scale these interventions up to quasi-experiments. And if you're not familiar with a quasi-experiment, that tends to be a naturalistic kind of experiment where you can't necessarily control who's in what group. And in the case of what we were looking at, we were trying to implement these really neat curricular innovations in real classrooms. So we were bringing them to Gen Chem courses, organic courses, and trying to see whether or not this was moving the needle. And so I can tell you from personal experience, I understand how messy it is to look at the data from these courses. You have a lot of different factors that can impact student outcomes. And so this is a challenge that, we've developed a lot of solutions for this out in the research world. And I wanted to bring that to Labflow as part of developing data insights. So what is data insights? For some of our current customers, you may have already experienced a little bit of what data insights shows you. For those of you who are new, really data insights has a single core mission, and that's to give you as the instructor some insight into the health of your course. Is my course running smoothly and well? And how can I look for evidence that maybe it may not be in the best shape and I might need to intervene? So data insights tries to take the data from your course and provide it in a few cross sections that are going to give you insight into different aspects of the health of your course. The first one that we're going to see is grading progress. So we know that we want our TAs, our instructors, to stay on top of their grading, not only because it's, kind of a pain to chase them down. We also want to make sure that our students are getting an even and really the fairest educational experience that they can. And regular instructor feedback, TA feedback, is absolutely a part of that. Once an activity has been graded, we then want to look for trends in that grading. So it's not just enough to grade it. You have to grade it in a way that is fair to the student. So looking at grading trends is something that also I'm sure a lot of you spent a lot of time doing. So we have both assignment level and course level views where you can see trends in score data from your students. The newest thing that we've added to Data Insights, and we're really excited about this is new as of just a few weeks ago, is a way for you to gauge whether or not your assessments are properly telling you what your students do and don't know. I think to give us an analogy to maybe help understand why this is so important, in the laboratory, we know that we need to use certain type of mass balances depending on how much of a quantity and how precise we want to measure out a quantity of, say, a dry ingredient. Our assessments, like reports and quizzes, function in a very similar way, where we want to make sure that we are accurately calibrating the kinds of things we test our students on to not only their prior knowledge, but also where they are at in terms of their educational trajectory. So really excited to show you that.
Thanks, Dane. Just a quick side note. So I asked in the chat, if you are a current Labflow user, have you used or how do you use or have you used Data Insights? And we have actually a couple of people who have not yet even explored it. So this is great. And then Kristen said she uses it almost daily. So that's great news. So yeah, as you get more comfortable with it and as we go through things and kind of explain, Dane's going to go into certain scenarios where each function of Data Insights could help you. I think we'll have some more almost daily folks for sure. So.
Yeah, that's the goal. So I mentioned, in my previous work that, I've worked on a lot of curricular innovations. And really at the core, I am a design researcher. So not only do I build things, I also try to work directly with my users. And in some cases, that's students. But in the case of Data Insights, that's been primarily lab instructors and lab coordinators in terms of how we can best meet your needs in terms of what kind of data helps you make informed decisions about how you're running your course. So I worked very closely with some faculty partners who are current users of Labflow as we were developing the newest iteration of Data Insights. Really, we had a long conversation about everything from what does it mean for a grader to be doing their work on time? What does it mean for you to find evidence of a student maybe cheating? So we talked about all kinds of the pedagogical aspects about running a course. And I had them also use the interfaces that we had been working on for Data Insights. And we got a ton of valuable feedback in terms of not only the kinds of data that they wanted to see, but how they wanted to be able to interact with it so they could filter it, search it, sort it. And all of these got distilled down into recommendations that turned into what we will be seeing today, which is the new version of Data Insights. There's a lot of content on these pages. We're probably not going to be able to go down every single possible pathway that you can explore. but I want to at least highlight some of the useful ways that data insights can be integrated, especially for those of you who are at the end of the semester and are starting to think about finalizing grades and might be getting emails from students about, quibbling about a half point here and there. So we'll dive into that, but there's a lot of content. And one of the things that's we're going to see over and over and over again is not only a class level view of relevant data, but also that data presented for you broken down by meaningful groupings. And in this case, the groupings are going to be by instructor or by section, just depending on how your course is set up. So with that, I would like to present a scenario. And this is probably a scenario that every single one of us on this call has thought about and asked themselves, are my teaching assistants caught up on their grading? It's an important thing. I think we all agree that that's important. So how can we use data insights to track that? So what I actually want to show us, I've actually got some data from a real course in Labflow. Just so that you know, I have removed any identifying information about the graders in this course, but we can see a snapshot of a real course to show you what this data looks like. So the first tab that we see here is the grading status tab, and it is what it sounds like. It is a bird's eye view of all of the grading that's being done in your course, and we use a number of different visual conventions to kind of show you what is the information that I need to extract from this page. Each row of this table, that's going to represent a section of your course. In some courses, it'll default to your grader views. Unfortunately for this course, their setup was more complicated, so we do show you the section view by default. The column views here, those are going to be your reports. And of course, the intersection of those two is going to give you information about how that section's grading looks for that report. Using just a quick scan, we can look at this data and see quite a bit of grading has been done. For reference, we've got a key down here that tells you how to interpret what you see visually. But what I'm going to start paying attention to now is anything that is marked red in terms of being graded. The more red something is, the less grading has been done. So I can already see from this data that I have a few sections where it's not that just one report is behind on grading. I actually have multiple reports that are behind on grading. And it's not even across the class. So I have some of my sections where the grading is completed, but for some of these sections, it's not. If I want to see who is associated with the section, I can click on the section name and it's going to tell me who the graders are that's assigned to this section. This has been, as I mentioned, I removed their identifying information. You would see the full names of the individuals in this particular section who are the TAs. So already I can see that there may be some issues here. I can go through and I can identify who I might need to talk to. If I have too much content on the screen, I can just say, only show me the reports where I have grading remaining. And you can see we have 5 reports, so I might need to talk to some folks. And I'm going to focus maybe on these cases where grading is significantly behind, and those students might be unfairly disadvantaged by this TA not being up to speed on what they need to be doing. A lot more here than we're going to talk about, but feel free if you have questions about any of what you see here or questions about interactivity, we can address those during a Q&A. All right. So then the next scenario, so once we kind of have a grasp on grading, we might then ask ourselves, okay, grading is done, but now I've got some students who are emailing me saying, my TA just wasn't really grading us fairly. I had the same report as another one of my classmates. We essentially answered the questions in a similar way. Why is my score so much lower than theirs? This is a problem of uneven grading. And uneven grading can happen for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's just random, but sometimes, it comes against the time constraints of TAs. TAs are generally also research assistants, and so part of their time is being split between grading and research. And, the motivations there may be to get grading done as quickly as possible. And this can lead to, unfortunately, scenarios where the TAs might not be giving very good feedback to the students or might not be critically evaluating what the students are answering. So how do we track uneven grading in a class? Well, there are 2 distinct views that we can use. The first is the Score History tab. This allows you to zoom out at the course level and see, all right, what does my grading look like across all of my TAs? And you should see very quickly visually anything that stands out. We are going to flag for you anytime that we detect an outlier, and we have different detection models that we use on different pages, but we try to keep the visual coherence very, very aligned across these pages. So it's going to stand out for you in red. We have this Thursday at 8 a.m. section. They're systematically below the rest of the class. This is maybe something that I wanted to follow up on and figure out what's going on. When I look at all the assignments for this section, it looks like this colligative properties report is the lowest of the bunch. So I'm going to start there and see maybe if I can explain why I'm seeing the trend that I'm seeing. So the next place I might go is the score distribution tab, which I have open up in a separate tab in my browser. And what we can see here, I'm actually going to flip a couple things to get it back to the original state. Okay, so this is what it would look like when you load it. So when I load the score distribution tab for the colligative properties assignment, I get a view of the distribution of data in terms of scores that students received on this activity. But then on the right-hand side, this is going to be meaningfully broken down for me by section. So I can see the kind of the density of scores for each of my sections. In terms of the technical, what we're showing here, again, we're going to give you a little guide down here on the bottom of what each of these symbols means. The circles here, that's the median score for each section. This kind of bluish teal bar, that's going to be your interquartile range. So we think back to our freshman statistics. This is going to show you that median 50% density of scores. And so then we can start to look across all of our sections and look for things like, a median that's either too high or too low relative to the course. And if I specifically want to find that Thursday at 8 a.m. class, I believe it was this one, all right, I can see that, yeah, the score distribution here shows me a lower median than the class distribution. And compared to their peers, they're not the worst, but they definitely are on the lower end in terms of how they scored their students. Sometimes, though, I notice when I look over here, there's quite a few students that may have gotten a 0 on this assignment. So just to make sure that that's not unfairly biasing what I'm seeing, I'm just going to remove any student from this analysis who did receive a 0. And we can definitely see it improve, but there is still a strong weighting of negative scores down here below 40%, so that are dragging down those medians. So this actually it's confirmed here that this Thursday 8 a.m. section really is the lowest median. I can then use a go to report link to then go to the grading page for this report and specifically start to isolate those students' responses from this submission of this report and see if I can figure out why they're being scored lower. You may not be concerned, though, if this looks fine to you and you don't see anything that's a visible outlier based on our detection model. You may say, the students, yeah, they might be upset about this, but it's not really enough for me to act on. If you would like to change the criteria, though, that we use to detect those outliers, we do give you that functionality. So if 20% is a little bit too lenient for you, you can change it to something like 15% if there's a deviation of that class or that section relative to the class of 15% or more. We're going to flag that for you. And now we can see, actually, it's not just that Thursday at 8 a.m. section. I might need to look at 4 of these sections that may have had similar issues. So that's just kind of one.
Brought up a great point in the chat. She said, I like when you do have an outlier of TA grading, you can easily go back to them, coach them, and then with Labflow, they can actually regrade the assignment before it's posted. So you can coach them on, hey, TA number 1, your score, look at this data. I can show you that you're actually way lower than the rest of the course. Let's talk about your grading practices and actually give them an opportunity to regrade because the software is so easy to use. And that's a coaching moment for them, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And really the idea here is you as the lab coordinator, lab instructor, you're the expert. And so what we hope is that we can provide you with data that allows you to make those informed instructional and kind of human management decisions around your course and catching it before it's the end of the semester and it becomes a bigger issue. I think the only other thing I wanted to kind of point out here is one of the things that came out of my conversations with faculty is, yes, they're concerned about the low end of the scale for, a TA maybe who's being a little too punitive. It's also at the top end of the scale that it's a problem too, where the TA may have just given everybody full marks and actually didn't grade what they had submitted very, very closely. So we do allow you to also isolate those by filtering out to only show you the outlier cases. So that can help you, especially if you have a big course. This will help you isolate down to those points of interest.
Great.
So we finalized all of our grades. We got everything submitted to the registrar. Pretty confident that we were able to address and triage the issues that came from students and our TAs. Now it's summertime, and I'm starting to think about, okay, I really want to try and improve some aspects of my course so that when I implement it again in the fall, I fix some things that maybe I missed during this implementation of this course. And one of the things I noticed is that I set up a quiz, and in this particular quiz, I didn't realize it, but I was randomly assigning questions to my students, and some of the students actually got questions that were harder than some of what the other students saw, just by complete random chance. So I want to go in and see if I can identify places where I might want to redesign some of my assessments to better measure what my students know the next time around when I do this course. So this is where the new, what we call the item analysis tab is going to really be a helpful tool, I think, in this effort. The item analysis tab uses ideas from item analysis, which comes from test theory and psychometrics, so that you can evaluate how well your items are calibrated to your respondents. And there's a number of metrics that you can use to do this, and we've presented the most common ones here in this table. You can see I just picked a quiz. Let's say we were a little concerned that the safety quiz that we put out had this issue of students getting questions that were either too hard or much easier just by random chance based on pools. So what I do is I look through this and I say, okay, let me look at the different pools of questions and see whether or not that actually happened, where I had a question that snuck in there that was maybe unfair if a student saw it by chance. So this first set of questions here about using laboratory safety equipment, what I can do is see each of the questions that a student could have seen when taking this quiz. The first column, after we get a little information about what the prompt was, we can then see how many students got this question correct. So what percentage of my students who did this question got it right? So you can see across the board for these questions, 99%, 96% of students got it right, 95, 97. This is a situation where I would actually be very comforted to see, really, this group of questions was fine. Doesn't matter who saw the question. Everybody did roughly well on this. So there's really not much that I need to do on this section of this quiz if I'm going to redesign it. Scrolling down, looking through other question pools, this particular quiz had a few. I don't see anything necessarily in this one that looks alarming. I do see this score here is a little bit lower. But now I get to the responding to an emergency part of this quiz, and now I'm starting to see things that I want to pay attention to. I'm noticing that for the most part, these questions are in the high 80 to 90% range, except for this question, information necessary to be prepared for an emergency. I think we can all kind of collectively say that we want our students to be prepared and understand what to do in the case of an emergency. This question, though, being mixed in with other questions here that are much easier, might actually unfairly disadvantage the students who saw this. The item discrimination, if you're not familiar with this concept, this lets you know how well your high-performing and low-performing students did on that question. And you should expect in general that your high-performing students who did well on that quiz probably will get the question correct. Your students who didn't do so well on the quiz are more likely to get that question incorrect. And so we'll show you what percentage of those cohorts got this question correct. And the discrimination is that gap between those numbers. So for this question, 48% of my low-scoring students on this quiz did not get this question correct. And because this question was difficult relative to this group, I might say to myself, let's actually, when I redesign the safety quiz, this is an important question that I want every student to see, and I don't want it to be mixed in with easier items. So I'm going to pull this question out and make sure that every student sees it. We might still see that the students, the lower performing students still struggle on this, but then that also gives us instructional information about, let's make sure we spend a little bit of extra time talking about emergency preparation, not just a one and done. We're going to make sure it comes up at least a few times in the beginning of the course.
This is great. So yeah, if you're a current user, this whole screen is brand new as of maybe last week or the week before. So this is a perfect time of year to use this. We're wrapping up the term and you can kind of look. And then if you want to meet with us and kind of go through this in more depth, and Dane can meet with you, your FSM, and just talk about, okay, as I'm prepping my course, my Labflow course for this summer or next fall, what easy changes could I make to do this better? So Dane would be happy. We talked before the call to join those one-on-one meetings. So you can just reach out to your faculty success partner and let them know, I want to look at this page and I want to make some changes. And this is brand new, like I said. So we're really excited to dig in to this kind of stuff with you all. And if you're not a current user, then if you do start to use Labflow, this data will accumulate over the course of the term.
Yeah, and I probably didn't emphasize this in the beginning, but this data is all on demand. So anytime you want to check in on this content, all you need to do is go into Data Insights in your course and load any one of these views and explore. And it requires no extra effort on your part, no exporting to an Excel file. We do that part for you. But I do want to point out, of course, that we can't do everything necessarily in these interfaces. So we do also offer a data takeout service. So if you want to pull down the raw data for any of these visualizations, it's just as easy as clicking the download link and bringing it into any kind of analytics program of your choosing.
I have a question for the group and for our current users that are in the call. Would the information on the item analysis page be available in any of their past courses, or is it only this semester moving forward?
So the item analysis is going to be available in all courses that have happened since the fall of 2021. So as long as your course falls in that time frame, item analysis we did a retrospective analysis on all previous courses in addition to future courses.
Thanks.
I did not know that, and that's really cool. So that could even be a bigger project, kind of look back at a few courses and see how it's going. This is really great. Morgan says this will be a great resource. Yes, it will.
Yeah, and we had a conversation with a university that's just going to use us, I believe, in the fall. And this particular instructor was also a chem ed researcher and was very excited about the potential for using the item analysis content in research work that he was doing. So we are also always looking forward to those kinds of interactions because we get excited, of course, but we can also add additional functionality onto this that not only support these kind of pedagogical choices, but also publishing interesting content from your course.
Yeah. Morgan has a question about how the item analysis tool interacts when you have multiple attempts. So if a student has 2 attempts, are both the attempts counted in this analysis?
Great question. Yeah. So this is based on the first graded attempt that the student submitted. It's pretty common, especially with pre-lab quizzes, that students will take multiple attempts. And of course, just by testing effects, by learning effects, they do get better as they do successive attempts. So we analyze the first attempt to give you insight on the first time they saw that question.
Okay, great. And then to piggyback on your, chem ed research, that is something that we hope to do this summer, is sort of host another, I'll call it a webinar, but it would be more like a workshop. If anyone has research ideas or things they're working on or things they want to present, perhaps next year at BCCE, Data Insights is such a cool tool to help facilitate that. So we are going to host something this summer to just brainstorm ideas, see how we can help. Dane would love to be a part of that.
I get excited about this stuff.
I do too. Yeah. So if that's even been like tinkering in your brain for a little bit, but it just seemed like such a heavy lift, we would love to talk to you about how maybe we could help that. And yeah, he's right. We have 2 customers actually coming on board with us this fall that are specifically using this tool to do some research that they plan to publish. So very exciting stuff. Any other questions about the tool, about the specifics? We showed you 3 scenarios that we feel like are pretty common, but there's tons of scenarios that you could dig into with this tool. And like Dane
tons of interactivity that we just couldn't even cover just because there's so much.
Yes. Yeah. I know it's a Friday and I want to be respectful of time. So this was meant to be sort of a high level view of why we do what we do, why we think this data is so important. You can't get this in your LMS. I don't know anyone that we've ever spoken to that's been able to recreate something like this without a major headache or even get close. So it is a really tool we're really proud of, and it really differentiates us from the other things you might use. So Christina asked the exclamation point next to the items and the item analysis. What is that indicating for us?
Yeah, so the little info icon. So like on the other pages that we saw, we do try to indicate when something needs your attention. So we are going to give you some information that this item may have met criteria where you need to review it. It's not always the case that, you'll read this and say, actually, no, I think this item is fine. Typically, if you have an item that is at the extreme end of the scale, kind of what we were talking, or what I had mentioned about, you want it nicely calibrated to where your students are at. You don't want them to be getting hundreds or zeros on all of your items. That doesn't mean you can't have a few in there. But according to some guidelines provided around item analysis, we used the same typology for flagging items that may need revision. The most common case where I think you really want to pay attention is if you have bad item discrimination when your low scoring students actually outperform your high scoring students. That can help you diagnose that maybe the question is worded in a confusing way, and probably more commonly that the grading criteria on the item is incorrect. So it's actually penalizing the right answer on that question. So this can help stand out that information for you. But yeah, so this is going to give you some in context why this item might need your attention.
That's the other thing I think is so special about this tool is if you have all this data in your LMS and you decide to export it, you then have to go find those outliers and find it. Our tool really brings them to the forefront for you. And like Dane said, you're the expert and you can do with that information what you want, but at least you don't have to sift through a bunch of spreadsheet rows to figure it out. And then Christina also asks, is this data pulling from scores in the gradebook or the submission tab?
This is pulling from, so the way that we have this set up is every time the student does an action in a report or a quiz, that sends out a record that gets stored in a database where we can handle big data transactions. And so this is going to be based on looking at those kind of instantaneous moments of what the student did on that question. And we're going to filter those and try to select from the first attempt that the student made on that quiz and grab how that item was graded. So if the quiz is only a one attempt quiz, you're going to see a 1-to-1 correlation between performance on items and the gradebook score. It's much more common for students to get 2, 3, or even, more attempts at a quiz because the pedagogical goal is to get them to understand the pre-lab content. That's not a hindrance to this at all because we still only look at that first attempt that they made at that quiz, but it will then appear maybe out of sync with what you see because you might see, well, they all got 100% on the quiz, which may be true, but it only may be true on the third attempt that they made. This is going to still isolate that first attempt data for you.
Right. So it's not necessarily reflecting their final grades, but more their first instinct, their first try.
Yes, and that's kind of the way that we do that in the tech world.
Great. So I just put a link to our survey in the chat if anyone has to hop off. I wanted to keep this short because, again, I know it's a Friday and we're coming to the end of the term and people are really, really busy. So we're going to hang out for, 10 more minutes. And we've got several members of the team on. And then Dane was going to show kind of what we're thinking about in the future. So when I said at the beginning that your feedback really, really means stuff to us, this is what I mean. This item analysis page is brand new based on dozens and dozens of interviews with professors and instructors. And now Dane has gotten a lot more feedback that we have some cool ideas for the future. So I'll let him give a sneak peek at that while people come up with any questions.
Yeah, so for anybody who's still able to kind of hang around, one of the things that we're kind of really excited about, the potential for this, is measuring grading time. So it's not just we want to know whether or not TAs are grading. We also want to know how long it's taking them to do that. A lot of times this is because, administration is making sure that we're not asking TAs to spend too much time when we want to keep their grading burden reasonable within their appointment. So one of the things that I've been working on is developing an estimation method for extracting how much time it takes TAs to grade. And this is a general technique, but we're really looking at this in the context of grading time. So this is a course. This is data from a real course where we looked at how long it took TAs on average to grade a post-lab activity versus a pre-lab activity. Not surprisingly, they were much quicker at the pre-lab activity, but we can see differences between those experiments in terms of how long it took them. This is going to give you not only the point estimate, but you also get like a nice band around, because there's a distribution to this data, so you can see how wide that distributional range is. And really, this is messy, but we can drill this data down to the individual level, so we can show you how any individual TA is, as long as it's taking them to grade content across time. And you are the expert, so you know these folks, so you know how long it's taking them and whether or not it's because they're a first year, maybe they're struggling to understand what exactly they're supposed to be doing when grading, and also the converse of if they're not really taking as much time as their peers, why that might be. Maybe they've got a conflict between research and grading that might be explaining that. You'll understand based on this data what's going on, but we have the ability to foreground that for you. And just as a little end cap here, what's really cool about this is we had a faculty partner, actually 2 faculty partners, time themselves grading and provide us with some self-report data to see if we could see how accurate this estimate was. And I'm just really happy to report that the estimation methods that I've been developing are quite accurate. The cases where we had a somewhat sizable discrepancy between self-report data and my estimates actually was because the instructor forgot to start timing themselves and had to instead just kind of estimate roughly how long it took them to grade. But we do see really good agreement. So with all of that information, I think we're in a good spot where we can start to turn this into either like a special report that we can build for you about your course, and maybe, fingers crossed, as part of the Data Insights suite of tools. And yeah, feel free if you have questions to put them in the chat.
Yeah, this is really exciting. I just put in the chat because this has come up. We have a lot of customers in California and a lot of customers in other areas that recently went through TA strikes, and a lot of, claims around time spent and compensation and stuff. And so this is a really cool tool to stay ahead of that, I think, making sure people are spending reasonable amounts of time, not unreasonable amounts of time.
Exactly. Yeah, we really want to make sure that it's not the unreasonable amount of time
Right.
for our TAs.
Yeah, so not in a punitive way, but in a proactive, oh, I have, 3 or 4 TAs that are spending a pretty unreasonable amount of time grading. What can I do to help them? And Labflow helps that automatically, but then we can also help coach them individually, or maybe redesign some of your assignments to help that. We do have a customer who uses Labflow where everything's completely auto-graded. So the TAs are really there to teach, to have office hours, and do their research. And so that's an option. And then if you don't want that, we can do a hybrid in the middle of some auto-graded and some manual grading. Cool. So yeah, we'll hang out for a little bit. If anyone wants to ask Dane any specific questions, you can also come off mute. I think you can request to raise your hand, and then I can bring you up if you want to ask any specific questions about the things that get him excited about data or other ways. There is a question on the survey of any other data that you would like to see. Can't make any promises, but like I said, we do design this stuff based on your feedback. So if there's something that you're like, I'm always struggling every week to figure this out, we would love to hear it and help you maybe build it into the software. There's also an opportunity on this form to request a deeper demo, either of Labflow as a complete platform or just Data Insights, because I know it was a lot that we just went over. So if you're a current user and you're like, I want to use this tool, but I'm not really sure how, Dane would love to meet with you and kind of train you and teach you, and any other instructors as well that you work with. Cool. Well, we'll hang out for a few minutes. Like I said, I don't see any questions coming in, but if anyone has any, would love to hear from you. And please fill out that survey. We really, really appreciate it. I will send the recording of this later today, so you can go back and watch any areas you need clarification or share it. We would love for you to share it with anyone in your department or your peers that you think might find this interesting. So thank you, Dane. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Liz, Erica, and Jordan for being here as backup. And everyone have a wonderful weekend. Happy Cinco de Mayo if you celebrate. All right. Talk to you all soon. Thank you.